Okay, welcome, folks. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I know a number of people are still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get it started. Hope folks got a little fun from the No Kings Jam. It's a really big moment. And I just want to start by saying welcome. My name is Nora. I'm on the Indivisible team. And in just a second, we're going to hand it over to facilitators from the group Beautiful Trouble, who are going to be leading the safety and de-escalation training today. But first, just a couple of pieces for some ground setting and orientation to our space today and also the moment that we're in. I've got a couple pieces for you, but first, I'm going to hand it over to Mary from the Indivisible team as well.
Welcome, everyone. I am really glad to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm especially excited that we're partnering with Nadine and Kaya from Beautiful Trouble, who are going to be talking to us throughout the course of the next 90 minutes. But before I hand it over to them, I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of set the stage for what we're doing this afternoon and why it matters so deeply. Speaking for myself and for Indivisible and for the entire No Kings Coalition, I just want to be really clear that we believe in peaceful protest and believe in nonviolent theories of change. You're going to hear more in a minute from Nadine and Kaya about the action guidelines that we'll be using during these events. But at their core, they really come down to a simple but powerful commitment, which is that, again, we believe in nonviolent strategies for change, and we believe in taking care of one another and also our communities. And that commitment has always been really important and always mattered, but it does even more so matter right now. I know that many of us have been tracking the headlines and videos and pictures coming out of LA and surrounding areas in Southern California over the last couple of days. I think we've got some folks from that area on the call tonight. We are watching what this kind of repression and crackdown looks like in real time. We are all raising our voices at a time of rising authoritarianism and at a time when the administration is actively looking for excuses to shut down dissent and to close civic space. They want to paint us as threats. They want to justify their repression. They are actively trying to manufacture evidence that does not exist, that's not real, but they want to manufacture evidence to justify what they're doing. And it is critically important that we do not give them that. You signed up to be a host or to be on a core team because you know what is at stake. You know that more people believe in democracy, in freedom, in justice than believe in unchecked power and authoritarian rule. You know that America doesn't do kings. That's why you're here, why you signed up to be part of No King's Day this coming weekend. And to keep growing that movement, to keep growing the collection and coalition of people who agree with that, and to keep protecting the space to organize out loud, out front, and out in the open, we have to show up on Saturday and the days from now until then with discipline and unity and with purpose. We need to stay peaceful and we need to stay grounded. And we need to be ready to de escalate tensions if they arise, whether that's from counter protesters or from our own folks or from local law enforcement or from deployed National Guard. We need to remind each other why nonviolence is not just a moral stance, but actually a strategic imperative. And that's what this afternoon is about. With that, I'm going to hand it to Nora to walk us through a couple of logistics for the chat and for the Q&A function, and then hand it over to Nadine and Kaya to get us into the meat of this.
Thanks, Mary. And speaking of the chat, I know folks are still all saying hello, where they're calling in from. Just want to give some particular love to any folks calling in from LA who may be, feeling particularly affected. Hope your folks are safe right now. Okay, so a couple of things about just what to expect for the next 90 minutes. Actually, that is one piece of it, is that this is a 90-minute training. We're going to be going until, God, I'm on Central Time. So 4:30 Central Time, 5:30 Eastern, you can do the conversion. Additionally, this training was set up specifically with focus on folks who are hosting or sort of involved in the core planning of No Kings events. If that does not apply to you, if you're somebody who's just planning to attend in general and you want some safety and de-escalation training, first of all, you're very welcome to stick around for the rest of today. We do also have a couple of Know Your Rights trainings coming up that are like broad general audience, super important, one in English, one in Spanish, coming up later this week. We'll drop the links to those two. Those are a great resource for general skill building, especially if you're not a lead or event host or core planning team. Another thing, this was communicated in the promotion around this training, but sometimes things get lost in the sauce. We just wanted to say what's happening for the rest of these 90 minutes is a best fit if you are in person with someone else like dialed into this Zoom call, but somebody that you can practice and role play with in real life. Again, if that's not the case for you, you didn't get the memo, totally fine. You're very welcome to be here. A lot of folks were on our last version, just kind of doing solo reflection or saving those role plays to do with a friend or somebody they're working with on these events at another point in time, but just wanted to give you all a couple of heads ups there. Last but not least, the stuff that's actually on the slide right now, just some things about the Zoom space. So in just a second, we're going to be, and actually for most of the call, we're going to pause the chat. It's such a large group, it just moves really quickly. We will turn it off sometimes because our facilitators are going to have prompts, inquiries, moments where we want people to be using that feature, but we'll just turn it off at other times just so folks can stay focused on the content. Couple more things that means. One is if you have questions, send them through the Zoom Q&A feature. We'll also try to catch it if you put it in the chat. It's just a little easier to track there. And yeah, Mary and I are going to be tracking questions are coming through, responding to some as we can, and also saving a lot of them for a live Q&A section at the end. So if we're not answering things right away, it might be because we just want to address it more fully at the end of the call. And then I just want to say in those moments when the chat is on, let's just keep the conversation like focused and supporting each other in that. I don't know if somebody pulls up a thing and says, actually, I prefer McDonald's over Burger King, now's not the time to get into well, actually, no, I think it should be the other one because so we'll keep even the chat when it is on focused on what we're here for, and really appreciate people being supportive and constructive with each other in that process. And just want to give a shout out as well to some of the other folks on this team who are doing back end work. Thanks, Jules, on slides and a couple other pieces. So, okay, so I think that is it from me, and I'm gonna pull up our core facilitators here and hand it over to them. So Nadine and Kea, thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you, Nora and Mary, and Indivisible and other hosts of No Kings coming up on No King's Day coming up this Saturday, less than a week from now. We're really glad that all of you are here with us. More than, it looks like 1,200 folks at the moment and probably climbing. We are calling in from around the country. I am reaching you from Nakachank or Anacostan lands outside of Washington, D.C. My name is Nadine. I use she, her pronouns. One of the groups I work with here is Beautiful Trouble, actually globally. And I'm really delighted to have my co-facilitator be Kea Chatterjee today. You want to say hi, Kea?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kea Chatterjee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with Free DC and in Washington, D.C., very close to Nadine, also on Nakashtank and Piscataway land, and really happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right to the next slide, I think, which should be an agenda, just so that folks can understand where we're going for this next little bit of time. We'll do a bit of context and grounding. We're going to dive into dealing with conflict because we know that our capacities individually are related to our capacities as groups and how we communicate outside of our little bubbles across the nation and across the world. We'll look at planning for success, a specific tool called early warning, early response. We're going to dive into it and practice it. And then we're going to share a lot of resources and do a bunch of questions and answers, or at least guidelines for where to get more information before we do our closing. Hope you're all ready. Give us some love with the reactions, and we'll know that people are on board to really dive in and work. Yeah, I love that. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to do a quick little poll actually right now to see a little more about those of you who are here today. And maybe we can go to the next, there it is. The poll has popped up, hopefully for those of you. And if you're in a room of a lot of people, feel free to put more than one answer in. If you're by yourself, put one answer in. It asks a spectrum of what kind of experience do you have with helping lead or coordinate protests and demonstrations? Some of you might be very experienced, do this all the time, very comfortable. You'll notice the other one is the other extreme of this spectrum is this is my first time attending an event or organizing an event, right? So we'd love to hear and see a little more who's on this poll. Oh yeah, okay, it looks like we've got a bell curve. We're working on a bell curve. Lots of folks with some experience. Lots of people who have attended but no experience, and even some first timers. Welcome all. Yeah, we'll give it another second. since we know that there are now, let's see, like 1,300 people or something on here. We'll try to get more than 1,000 folks responding. Looks great. All right. We can wait one more minute. And I see that lots of people in the chat are mentioning some of their experience, some of their knowledge. We're actually going to dive into that a little bit more in a minute. So I think we can close the poll. Yep. And we can see we've got, yeah, pretty much of a bell curve. Some really experienced folks comfortable with being out in public doing things, and some new people. Excellent. All right. Thanks for engaging there. We are going to see this happen quite a bit. We're going to engage you in putting things in the chat and responding while we go through this training. Now we're going to ask, I think you can actually turn the slides off for a minute, and we could take a moment to do a little bit of a grounding before we start. And we can even close the chat too to give us a little focus space. I'll turn it over to Kaya.
Great. Thanks, Nadine. There's obviously a lot going on right now, and I think all of us have a little bit of our hearts with folks in California and LA and around. And I want to just take a minute and just invite folks, if it's available to you, to kind of like put both your feet on the ground and sit up straight, take a deep breath, and close your eyes if that's comfortable to you. And I just want you to take a minute and think about the future. And I want you to think about maybe somebody in the future, somebody who's a couple generations into the future. So maybe this is someone who's related to you. Maybe it's a biological great-grandchild, or maybe it's someone who's not related to you. It doesn't have to be someone who's related to you. Somebody who's sitting in the future and they're looking back at 2025 and they're reading about 2025 and this moment, this really critical moment in time. And they're actually reading about you. And they found some information about what you were doing in this moment. And they're reading through this and they're feeling some emotions. And they're thinking about what they feel, and maybe imagine that they feel pride thinking about what you did in this moment. And think about what else they might feel, realizing the role that you played and thinking about the courage that you had in this moment. And just let that feeling kind of sit with you for a second. And when you're ready, open your eyes, take another deep breath. And I want you to keep that feeling with you because it's going to power us through some courageous moments throughout this training, and of course throughout the next week when we're all going to be doing things together. That of course is going to make it easier, but it's also going to make it easier when we think really carefully about why we're doing this, what grounds us, and also what kind of ancestor do we want to be to the people who come after us. And I know that the people that are in your lives and will be thinking about you are going to be so proud of you. And so I just want to be really thankful that you're here today, and also encourage us to keep that in our hearts, that we are in a Zoom room full of people who are doing everything that we can to be really good ancestors and stewards in this moment. So thank you for that. Nadine?
Yeah, thank you, Kaya. Really, really helps me ground as we move into this work and as we continue to do the work. Really appreciate it. So take that. Let's bring this with us while we do the work today. And another thing that we need to ground ourselves is in the reality of this authoritarian takeover or the closing civil society space and what we're up against. And one of the real tools of authoritarians, right, is to strike fear into the hearts of all of us and into all of our organizations. And that shows up in a bunch of ways. I'm sure people are really familiar with this, right? The fear response includes flight. People are going to run away from things. It includes fighting, right? Actually aggressively fighting back. It includes fawning, bowing down, obeying in advance, right? And it includes being frozen, not actually knowing what to do. And all of those responses, while totally normal for a lot of us, flight, freeze, fight, and fawn, are really not going to help us in this moment unless we figure out how together we face the problem of authoritarians and we address that fear will not get us out of this, and that we need to lower our stress level and build our capacity to take care of each other, work together, be innovative, and prepare to take greater risks, whatever the spectrum of risks are, from speaking out to supporting others who speak out, for example. And so we are here, we are grounded in the real work of learning how to do this together, and looking at being better at it individually, being better at it in our communities, and speaking across difference and divides. So we welcome you all into this work, and we encourage you today, even though we're on Zoom, hopefully some of you are in a space with other people. If not, maybe you call somebody up on the phone, or you use your dog or your cat as your partner for the exercises we'll do. But we really encourage you to embody and practice and put the most you can into this work. To that end, we'll take a little look at a little bit of history.
Yeah, so folks, we're gonna get the chat open again. And before we close the chat, I was actually starting to see people popping into the chat, some of the movement leaders whose shoulders we stand on, some of the movements themselves from different eras. Not even in our lifetime, sometimes within our lifetime, our lived experience. But these were all things that I was starting to see in the chat that were fundamentally about examples of when we have seen people power succeed, when we have benefited from these incredible movements that have come before us. So I'd love to just see a few more examples in the chat. If folks want to write in the chat, what are some of the movements that we stand on the shoulders of? You know, we know that these are all over the country, all over the world. Amazing examples here. Stonewall, Harriet Tubman. They're coming in so fast, I can hardly even read them. Suffragettes, AIDS, and ACT UP, where you had die-ins. We have, wow, this is so fast. I love all of these people, all this strength, all these incredible ancestors coming through. John Lewis, freedom riders, women's rights, climate movement. I mean, these are all movements where they were able to create this incredible change through what they did. And we can think a little bit maybe about like what makes these movements effective. Like what did they do that made their people power work so well? One thing with all of these movements that I can see that they have in common, all of them that I can see, I see union movements, equal rights, all these movements actually were pretty large scale. And that's one thing to think about, that like the size really matters. Nadine, do you want to reflect a little bit on things you're seeing?
Yeah, I love this too. And we're seeing everything from environmental movements and climate justice to suffrage movements, the right to vote and the right to govern oneself. And oh, it's just, thank you all for throwing down in the chat like this. I guess, in addition to like building the biggest tent possible, one of the things that helps us build the numbers is our commitment to nonviolent action, to lowering the bar to entry, because most people really don't want to do harm to each other, or they don't want to get harm done to people that they know or love. And so we want to make sure that we open our space to the most people possible. And the last thing that we see in a lot of these movements is they really were strategic thinkers. They did planning, and planning allowed folks to do things like today, to do trainings, to prepare people for what they were going to see, to do assessment, and to then do innovative and escalated tactics, to do things that increased our capacity to make change and increased our power. So I love all this, all the LGBTQ stuff coming in, everything, especially happy Pride, folks. Here we are on the big Pride weekend in DC. Really appreciate all that. So let's keep going with all that. And actually, maybe now we'll close the chat again. Thank you for sharing some of your knowledge and the shoulders and the ancestors whose work we stand on, and we owe a lot to. We're going to move back to the slides, I believe. Are we? Yeah, we are. And we're going to introduce a role play. And again, if you're by yourself, you'll have to either write down the answers or, use a stuffed animal to practice with you. Hopefully you're in a room with other people, and we would encourage you to do it in pairs or triplets if you have to. We're going to give you a very particular scenario. We'll show it to you in a minute. And then we're going to give you a role to play, and we're going to give you literally 3 minutes to do it. So actually right now, let's go to the slide deck, the next slide, actually, in the slide deck. And you'll be able to see a role play scenario that we would like you to practice with to start before we do a debrief and talk about de-escalation and escalation and how we deal with conflict overall. Good place to experiment. So this particular role play scenario takes place on public transit, right? If you're in DC like Kay and I are, we might be doing it on the subway or the metro, as it's called here. There will be a third person involved who's not actually engaged in this little chat. However, one person who is in this scenario is going to be screaming at someone else. Maybe they're attacking them for political reasons. Maybe they just don't like the color of their shirt or their shoes, but they're making a ruckus on a public transit, right? Subway, bus, whatever. The other person's going to try to get them to stop yelling, stop harassing the third party. The third party's not active in this scenario, right? So this is really a two-person role play. And we're going to see what happens, what you use to try to get them to stop yelling. Does that make sense? Let's have some thumbs up some thumbs up reaction. What we're going to ask you to do, if you're in groups, you're on mute, you can just turn and practice. If you're by yourself, you can write down answers. Excellent. Kaya and I are going to model this. It's always really fun. Are we ready, Kaya?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Oh my God, look at this person. You shouldn't be on the metro. I can't believe
Hi, my name is
you
Kaya.
ridiculous.
My name is
You look
Kaya.
like-
I'm just
What?
I'm just noticing, I'm
What?
just noticing that you have a lot of energy on
Why
the
is that
train.
so-
And I
Yeah,
know
of course.
this
Look
is
at that
actually one
person.
of the 2000 series trains. And I just thought that maybe that's what you were like really excited about pointing
About the
out.
train?
Do you want, yeah, because actually the seats are arranged in a different way on these trains than normally. And so there's just like
Cut. Excellent. All right. So we just did a little model. Maybe we could actually open the chat up for a second. What happened there? I was screaming. Kaya tried to get me to stop screaming at the third person. Excellent. Oh, yeah. Disarming, distraction, deflection. Yes, yes, right. Kaya introduced herself. I was like, what? Okay, so there was a lot. Trains are cool. Yeah. Okay, great. So we got the idea. We can learn a lot even from that 10 seconds of role play. So we're gonna actually shut the chat down again. And after the chat is shut down, we're gonna ask you to take on the scenario and think about what you would do. Assign one person to scream, somebody else to stop them from yelling, try to stop them from yelling. If you're by yourself, write down what you would do. So we're going to go ahead and click on the 3-minute timer. We're going to give you 3 minutes to dive in on your own. This is about half time. So if you want to switch and give somebody else another chance to do it, if you're in a group of folks, feel free to do that. All right, we're gonna wind it up as the timer runs out. Sorry about the annoying noise. Here we go. Let's bring it back in. So we're going to actually go to the next slide, and you'll see what we'd love to hear from you in the chat when the chat gets turned on is how it felt to either be the person screaming. How did that feel to you? Or how it felt to be the person who was trying to do the de-escalation. And comment as specifically as you can as did any one of you do or try anything that changed the interaction, making it worse or making it better? Go ahead and drop your answer in the chat. And Kay and I
And
will take
maybe when you share your feeling, share which role you were playing so we can see how the specific role felt.
Great. Yeah, some of you felt scared. Some of you felt prepared. Some of you felt like you needed preparation to intervene. It was challenging. Yeah. Oh, it also sometimes feels unnatural to be screaming. One of the keys about role plays is that it offers us a way to step into someone else's shoes. And that's really, really powerful. That's a powerful gift. Yeah, this is great. Excellent. People trying to find common ground, people asking questions. This is something you can practice in ordinary life, right? And um, sometimes actually somebody said, makes me want to scream right back. One of the tricks actually with somebody who's yelling is that you also can yell and talk really fast at their level and then bring your voice slower and quieter, and people will often match in pace, at least for a little while. That can be helpful. So try this in your regular world. All right, we're going to close the chat again, and we're going to go into a second role play. Okay, you want to introduce the second role play? We can switch
Yes,
this.
I do. If we can go to the next slide. So this role play is going to be in front of a building where a demonstration is taking place. If you were playing the role last time of being the person who was screaming, this time you can be the demonstrator. And so what we're going to do is have one person play a security guard who wants the demonstrator to move. And the other person is playing a demonstrator who wants to continue doing their demonstration. So you're going to have 3 minutes again, and we will start the timer and go. You're going to have to move. You can't stay here.
No, I'm going to stay here. I really want to stay here. No, you guys do it. All right. Well done. Okay. Do you want to take it or should I go for it?
Yeah. So if we can open up the chat again, would love again to just hear how did that go? Uh, did it had what happened? Let's see. I think we're not. There we go. Uh, someone got arrested by the security guard. It was tense in some places. Some folks walked away. Uh, let's see. It got violent in one uh role play. Some polite questioning in others. It's going by very fast. I'm trying to catch some of these.
There are some
Um,
issues around security guards, but it sounds like people felt like they could, some people felt like they could exercise their First Amendment rights. Hmm.
Amazing, amazing. So we know that in scenarios like this, there are, it can be very stressful, right? And we're seeing that a lot in the chat. There is somewhat of a stress reaction. And so should we go to the next slide, Nadine?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So if we can go to the next slide. Having a framework to think about can help reduce that stress reaction. Now, I know I am guessing I am not one of these people who makes good decisions when they are stressed out. Nadine, are you one of those people?
I actually make better decisions when I'm stressed. It's true, but just one, that's not common.
I'm guessing, tell us in the chat, do you make good decisions when you're stressed out? Okay, we have a lot of no's. I think most people oh, we have some yeses. We have some yeses. So most people are in the no camp with me. Some people are in the yes camp with Nadine. A lot of it depends, but we want to kind of give you a framework to reduce some of that stress. So this is the ABCDE. So we can remember it. It's a mnemonic. So the first thing we do when we're in a situation like this, whatever it is, we're on a train and someone's screaming or we're, at a protest, the first thing we want to do is assess. What's going on? What's around me? What is the conflict exactly? Nadine, should I pass it to you for B and we'll go back and forth?
Sure, that sounds great. So after you've got on the scene and you're like, is this something I should be involved with or not? In order to make better decisions, most of us have to ground. And one of the ways we do it is by taking a deep breath. Some of us do it lots of other ways, right? Maybe you count to 10. Maybe you recall why you're in the work or what you're doing. Some people do some kind of touch or tapping or think about growing roots through your
Oh yeah,
legs.
I learned this
Yeah.
thing recently. I forgot where you like put your thumbs together and I think this was in one of the trainings we were doing together and you tap your collarbone and I discovered that that actually really works for me.
It's a butterfly hug, and some people think about it, right? And it is a formal, actual tapping, which is a whole process for grounding and calming yourself down. There's also a really deep and simple physiological response that we can access. And that is if you use a longer exhale than inhale, it signals to your body, your nervous system response that you are safer. And so if you think about breathing in for 1 or 2 or 3 counts and breathing out for 3 or 4 or 5 counts, that can really simply calm you down. And these are things that we should try and practice before we're on the street in a stressful situation so that we can own it. Our practice of assessing where we are, our practice of breathing or grounding. Over to you.
And then maybe the most important thing to realize is that that is the letter C. We have a choice. So if we're coming from a calm place, we've assessed the situation, we make a choice at that point. We've seen some notes in the chat where people have said situations where they would not want to be involved. That's a choice. But we have to make a decision. Are we going to get involved? And if we are going to get involved, how are we going to get involved? Are we going to do D or are we going to do E? And both are acceptable depending on the circumstances. And I'll pass it back to Nadine to talk about D. But I think it is really important to remember that we want to be calm enough to be making a conscious decision, a choice about what we're doing in any stressful situation.
Yes, and we have just de-escalate and escalate here. We're going to talk a little bit about this because as activists, as organizers, as people who care deeply about the future of our country and people-powered nonviolent activists, we have to be honest that sometimes we might do something that someone else considers escalative. So for example, if we were to find ourselves blocking an entrance to a building where we think something that is unconstitutional is happening, the de-escalative thing might be to move when a security guard asks us to move. However, we might be intentionally committed to trying to change the outcome of that meeting, and we may not move. And that is actually an escalated action, and we are going to engage respectfully, intentionally, and nonviolently in that kind of action. So you have to be really clear. This is somewhat different than her, anti-harassment training, where we are focused on supporting and protecting people who are at the receiving end of violence. We do that as well as often think about the choice that we are making given our goals for a system, for a situation, not a system. So let's go to the next slide and take a deep look actually at de-escalation tactics. And by default, the opposite of our de-escalation tactics that can sometimes escalate situations. So we have a little tool, the 6 Ds. So in addition to the ABCs, the assess, breathe, and choose, if you get to de-escalation, you can think about what you do to de-escalate. The first D we'll talk about is direct intervention, right? And we had a lot of comments in the chat about pros and cons of this. If you put your body in the way, right, between somebody who's getting yelled at or getting attacked and that person who's doing the attacking, you run the risk of bodily harm yourself or taking the yelling or the kicking or the screaming on. We may choose to do this anyways if it's trying to protect someone we love or something we care really strongly about. It is a risk that we may be ready to take, right? This is all this stuff. There's very little rules. Actually, there's only one rule in all of this that we usually share with people. And one of them, so a lot of this is context specific, right? One rule does have to do with body language and body touch. What's the most, what do you think the most open, accessible, nonviolent body position is? Like some people
Maybe we can open the chat so folks can weigh in. What's open nonviolent body language?
what do we got? Hands open, palms open, hands up. So, I'll say I'm a pretty short, well, I'm kind of average size person. Somebody once said, oh, some tall guy said, put your hands like this, like you're praying. And I thought, no, that's scary, right? They could bonk me on the head with their prayerful hands. So it is not behind your back, because then who knows what you've got there. It's not in your pockets. It is hands open, empty. It's not take me to your leader. It is hands open and empty at your side, right? And sometimes that's difficult for us as activists because we are often carrying things, whether they're puppets or signs or sticks with props on them. These things could be perceived as a weapon, and so we want to be careful. And probably we want to make sure that we put them down slowly and intentionally, right? It, like we mentioned earlier, if somebody's yelling, we might try to bring the volume and the speed down and calm them down and say, I'm going to put this sign down intentionally. And this this body language relates to the one rule that we might mention. And that is that, number one, angry people do not like being touched. It's escalative generally. And the rule is don't touch a cop or authority figure or their bicycle or their horse or their dog or their car, because these are all extensions of police and they can all make escalative moves, be considered escalative moves and add additional charges like assault on police officer. So if you can, don't do that. Instead, do things like use active listening, right? I saw people mention that in the chat. Think about lowering your volume, slowing your movement. And, we saw some mentions of humor or singing or chanting. All these things, if you use in the right way, in the right context, can help you lower the energy of an interaction. What's the next one, Kaya?
Delay. So I'm wondering if anyone tried doing this in any of your role plays. I can, you could just say like, so I understand you want me to move, and I just need like, I'm waiting for somebody and they're going to be here in 5 minutes. And so, and they know I'm going to be right here. And so I cannot move right now. So, so that's just like delaying. It's just waiting it out, seeing if maybe the security guard gets bored and leaves you alone. Or other ways of just buying yourself as much time as possible, so that you can see, other options might appear if you delay a little bit.
Great. And a lot of people have mentioned distraction, right? That's awesome. Hey, there goes Beyonce. Distraction also could be something like dropping your backpack or spilling your coffee. Think creatively about that.
Yeah,
And
and then oh, sorry, go ahead,
oh,
Nadine.
do it.
See some folks talk about delegating in the chat as well, saying like, "Well, this is my build. I usually would go find somebody." Or delegating can also look at telling somebody, or it can look like getting a friend to help, or it can be like, can you come help with this situation, please? And so delegating is a really good way if you don't feel like you personally can intervene in that moment, to get enough help and still figure out how to de-escalate the situation.
Great. And we have two others, right? One is distance, making sure if you can put space between yourself and a problem, whether it's somebody with a weapon or it's another angry group of people, or there's just a conflicting group of people, you could actually put space between yourself and the problem. And the last one, I'm going to turn over to Kay to talk a little bit about, but I've seen people mention it in the chat, which is document. And documentation can be both escalative and de-escalative. We're going to talk about that really quickly before we go into our next piece of work.
Great. Yeah. So if you have a phone with you, there is a way to very quickly get to your camera on your phone by just swiping to the left on most phones. So everyone should know how to do that so you can quickly document. Now, if you have your phone like this in the face of a police officer, do folks tell us in the chat? Do folks think that that is escalative or de-escalative to have your phone here saying, "I'm recording you"? So a lot of folks are saying escalative. I would also ask then, like, what about here? What if I'm like here and I say, "I'm recording you. Just want you to know I'm live streaming. It's for all of our safety. Just want to keep everybody safe, officer." How's that feel? Escalative or de-escalative? So it really depends on the mood. Honestly, there's not like a yes or no answer, but I would say recording from a distance is a really important tactic. And sometimes I would even say, even though I actually don't know how to do this, I would say, "I'm just live streaming this, just so you know. Again, it's just for everybody's safety." And so it's a way to like make sure that it actually can really de-escalate the situation, just for somebody who's an aggressor to know that they're being watched. Not 100% of the time, but we know we've had many examples of actually, catching things on film that later were really important in order for legal cases to go through, that revealed to people that something had happened where people otherwise would not have known, or they only would have had the story that came from the aggressor. And so it's a really important thing that we can do. I will say that, as particularly in the environment we're in right now, one important thing, and again, everyone has a choice to make. One important thing we would recommend is that, I know a lot of people have it, is that folks not have biometrics on your phone. So that's like the fingerprint or the face recognition. We are in an environment right now where people's phones are being taken and they're being forced to be opened. And you just don't have a lot of options to stop that unless you have a numerical code. And so that's kind of the safest option we have, is to make sure we have numerical codes. And that's something that we would recommend from a safety perspective.
That's totally great. So there's a lot of good stuff coming in here. We're going to close the chat again. We will make this tool available to you. It's a handout from Beautiful Trouble. You can actually access this and other handouts at beautifultrouble.org/fuel, F as in Frank, UEL. But we'll make them available later. We're going to keep moving. We have a lot to cover still, to the next piece of our work. And that is an assessment tool. This is called the Early Warning Early Response Tool. And in fact, what it is It's something that's been used by unarmed civilian protection forces. These are people who work in armed conflict situations all over the world and serve the purpose of building safety teams and deploy them to help keep communities safe all over the world. You'll notice it's a little simple form, right? And what you do is you sit down and you think, what things could happen at our event? For example, on No King's Day this Saturday, what types of threats or issues would we face? And then you're going to think about what can you do beforehand to make that situation better, to ameliorate it, to put in place things that might help. During the event, what will you be doing and looking for? And then, of course, after. Debriefs are always really important to make sure that you achieved your goals or that you kept people safe or made it a very effective demonstration or event. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to give you some example. We'll quickly talk about this example before we again break out and give you a chance to talk to the people you're with. Think about your particular context, or if you're out by yourself, feel free to call somebody up who you organize with and talk through it. See if you can identify what you think the biggest issues or threats might be on Saturday. So you can see in this example, it could be that there's a communication problem, right? Or it could be actually the biggest one that's not on here, probably that some of you might deal with, is weather. I know we did a lot of stuff in the winter. It's obvious that cold's a problem, but heat exhaustion, heat stroke, extreme temperatures can be an equally big problem. But there might be simple ways to deal with it in the sense of reminding people to bring umbrellas for the sun, reminding people to bring water, having people throughout the crowd distributing water, spray bottles to cool people down, for example. Communication issues or issues with the police. The police could act appropriately or they could act repressively. So think about what you might want to have on site, whether it's safety teams that are trained, communication loops, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll come back and we'll do a little conversation about this. Okay, am I forgetting anything we should mention before we send people off?
No, I just say make sure you work through a before, during, and after of at least a couple of these threats as you go into your group work.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide before we break up. Actually, we'll put this in the chat, I think, but you all know, I think, what you're doing. If for some reason you're not clear, you could use this particular scenario where there's a publicly announced and permitted rally at a local park, followed by a march to a local government building, right? And you can imagine that the park is edged by two really busy roads, one of which you're going to try to use for the permitted march and rally. There's obviously, or not obviously, but there will be a stage with speakers, and we expect hundreds of people, right? So if you don't have another scenario, use this one. We're going to go to the next slide. And you'll see on the next slide, this is the format. Take some notes if you're by yourself, or even if you're with a group. Call someone up if you don't have anyone to talk to. But see if you can list out, take a few minutes and list out a bunch of threats. And as Kaya said, break at least a couple of them down into what you would do before, what you would do during, and what you might do after to make sure that we are not dealing with a problem. Does that make sense? Let's have some thumbs up in the reactions and we'll know that folks are with us. We're going to we're going to take about 8 minutes to do this. And then we'll open the chat up afterwards to hear how your work went. Awesome. So let's start the timer. Excellent. Thanks so much. All right, we're coming back.
All right, maybe we can open up the chat again and hear from folks what types of threats did you all start to think about for this event? And as you were thinking about those threats, what came up as a way to mitigate the threat? What would you do before, during, and after? So weather, tornadoes, ICE agents showing up, agent provocateurs. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what were your thoughts about how you can prepare in advance for some of these things. So educate yourself, walkie-talkies that can really help with communication. Sometimes from one end of an action to another end of an action, it's actually you have no idea what's going on unless you have some form of communication. Passing out know your rights, offering water, having de-escalators, having spotters out there, having music available to drown out any interrupters during the event. And so a lot of this is stuff where planning in advance is going to help a lot, and then so that you have the materials to do what you need to do during the event. And have that ready to go. So there's some great examples coming up here. These are all, these are all things that, are frankly just much less stressful if we prepare. And the more we spend time really thinking through, the more prepared we're going to be when that moment comes. So Nadine, is there anything else you want to share as we're looking through or call out from the chats? I see a lot of great examples of what folks have thought about.
Yeah, there's a lot of great examples. I think we should just jump right into sharing some more resources to help round out really what's in here about very specific personal prep on how you would prep yourself to how you prep your group and the processes and structures you want in place. So we'll start off actually talking about a lot of great resources available to you online, from harnessing our power to end political violence. The website is endpoliticalviolence.org. And this group that I also work with is looking at, you can go back to that other slide. Yeah, perfect. This group is looking at what makes repression successful and how we can make repression backfire. And so the first thing that we're talking about understanding is what political violence aims to do and how it actually physically does it. One thing we might notice is that they try to cover up injustice. They try to devalue the person or the people who are the brunt of it, whether they make fun of them, they're eating, or they say things that are not true, like they're eating the cats and the dogs, or they reinterpret something that's happening. All the people out there protesting are thugs and rioting, et cetera, et cetera. And then they say, but trust in the system. The system will actually, the official channels will actually give you what you need. And sometimes that's a false sense of security or due process when the system is not set up to give us rule of law or acknowledge human rights of all of us. And finally, political violence and repression often intimidate or even bribe people to come on over to their side, whether it's literally with money or access to power. Let's go to the next slide, because what's important to us once we acknowledge what the repression is doing is how we actually address each of those things. So what we would do is reveal or expose the injustice, like what's actually happening. We would redeem or validate the person or the people at the brunt of the action. These are our fathers, our parents, our sisters, our community members who are being harmed, and they're valuable to us. We would reframe and make sure that the injustice that is happening is understood as an injustice, that this is not business as usual, this is not normal, and people's rights are being violated. If folks are being confused and thinking that the system's going to solve the problem by itself, we help people redirect to community-based work and community processes and community groups so that we don't only have to rely on official channels. And of course, in this case, we might also encourage people to resist the bribes or intimidation of people to not speak out. And this is part of our 5-step plan to make sure that if violence and repression does happen, we make it backfire and basically drive more sympathy for the work that we're doing, increase our numbers, and build that bigger group that can actually make change for the future that we want. So this work is accessible to you on endpoliticalviolence.org. Another one, and we can go to the next slide. Another really quick piece of work would be to do an on-site quick scan. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. There could be there's all kinds of materials out there, but here's one that we find is really easy. You can actually count it off on your fingers. The first thing you might do is check in with yourself, right? Personally, how are you doing? Are you alert? Are you feeling okay? Are you well rested? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Check in. Remind yourself why you're there. The second thing is, what about the other people around you? You're the people that you came with, the people that you're responsible for, or what about the opposition, right? What are they doing? How are they acting? And what about authorities? Check out what's happening. So you start with yourself, you go to other people, and then you're in a place. What does the place look like? Do I know where my exits are? Do I know what's in the way of me exiting? Do I know where I could hide if I needed to hide? Is our perimeter secure? Are we vulnerable? And maybe you've talked to your people about, well, if we have to leave here, is there another place where we could regroup if we get divided? And then the fourth P is, what could I use what's around me that might be of interest or of use to me? Is there support? Are there legal observers? Are there medical folks? Are there communication tools that I have, whether they're phones, radios, even a flag, right, to move people if we needed to, sound system, other signage. And what could I work with or improvise with if I needed it? And then finally, if you are someone who's responsible for others, if you are someone who is responsible for a bigger plan, a security team, you might actually put all this together to think about your options and what kind of plans are available to you in case something happens, right? And what we just did was listing about threats and potential issues. So we bring all this together and think about how we move quickly or efficiently or slowly, depending upon the case, to put in place a plan that would help keep us safe and make the event most successful. Let's go to the next slide. Can I turn it over to you, Kaya?
Yeah, so we have No King's Day on Saturday, and we have some guidelines that hopefully folks have seen. So we're going to go through these just so they're top of mind today. So number one, we exercise our right to assemble peacefully in public spaces. Nadine, can I pass it to you for number two?
Yes, of course. And we know, and I'll just say more about the right to assemble. We know that we have rights and we are going to assert them, right? And the second one, we remain calm, grounded, and composed. And that means that we can lead with courage and we can model peaceful presence. I'll give you three.
We use de-escalation and mutual support to keep our community safe. So that's something we've talked about a fair amount today, all the different D options we have for de-escalation. And those are things where, the more we practice using them, the better we get at them.
Totally great. Number four is that we are going to amplify the message, not the mess. And this means that we can stay focused, we can avoid property damage, and we can resist provocateurs that could undermine the movement. And we know that that is possible.
Number five, we support higher risk participants. We know that, people who are on the other side want to divide us, that we know that they tend to go after the most vulnerable people. And we know that successful movements don't allow that to happen, right? And so we have we have to prioritize making sure that the people who are at higher risk, whoever that is, that might be, young children, elderly folks, trans folks, immigrants, whoever that is, having a plan to make sure we're supporting the people who are most vulnerable within our community who are going to come out on Saturday.
Great. And we're going to go to the next slide because there's a few more. Number six, we respect the safety, privacy, and consent of everyone. And how that might show up is that before we photograph or live stream anyone, we're going to get permission, especially higher risk folks. And we should get consent for that. And if you do share images later, you might put little flowers in the face of some vulnerable folks' faces if you don't have consent, if you decide you're going to post. Number 7.
And number 7, we document misconduct by law enforcement or others when safe to do so. So we talked about this a little bit. I like to say horizontally from a distance. I usually do let them know that I'm recording. You can make a choice depending on the moment. But this is actually a really important part of one of those R's that Nadine talked about, reveal. It's really hard to reveal what happened if we don't have documentation of it. And so that's why this is here.
Great. Number 8, we prepare ourselves and each other. That's one of the reasons we're all here today together. We're going to also, do our job. We're going to scout. And if we can't scout, we'll have a piece of paper or information about the route, meeting points, legal support, and exit plans. And we're going to make sure that the accurate information is shared within our group. And when we're on site, we're also going to share accurate information.
We take care of ourselves before, during, and after the protest. We need to be, especially at folks who are organizing these events, we need to make sure that we are our best selves on Saturday, which means that we probably need to be well rested and hydrated and have had something to eat. It doesn't help anybody if we are the ones passing out from the heat. So please do take care of yourselves before, during, and after the protest. Just like we did the before, during, and after in the Matrix, make one for yourself.
I love that. And we'll go to the next. We're going to share a few more resources that you can find. We'll drop in the chat. There's, pre, during, post action checklist, and there's lists of roles that you might want to have in your small groups. And some of this could be useful to you. They're not all going to be useful to you, but it will help you ask better questions and prepare for the work that you're going to do. And of course, there is the handout from the de-escalation and assertive intervention review that we did. That's also on the next slide, and we'll drop a link for that. And there are more resources, and you can go to the next slide too. There are more resources from the folks organizing No Kings, from Indivisible and others. We can drop a link to that website of safety, security, and digital prep for a second Trump administration. And there will be even more additional opportunities for folks to take trainings, as you know, and get prepped to be a marshal or a peacekeeper, as well as access written materials that will come out this week. So I think, is there anything else you want to share, Kaya?
No, I think we are good. I think we have a little bit of time for Q&A, yeah?
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. So we're going to invite our Indivisible host back on.
Yes. Hi there. Let me just, I'll pull myself up with you all for a second.
And I think we can stop screen share as well. And I really appreciate everybody for sticking with us.
Yeah, same. Hey, so thanks everybody for sticking with it. Just like Nadine just said, Mary and I have been in the process of answering the questions that we can. And now we're just gonna go over some of the ones that came up the most, and that we thought might be able to address. And I'll also just say, or maybe this is because I'm about to be the person saying this question to you, Kaya and Nadine, and realize it might be some of the questions there's no perfect answer for, or like we're all grappling with them together. So let's just understand that that might be the case. So for instance, I think a lot of people are thinking about what happened in LA this weekend. One person asked, they're sending National Guard troops to LA today. How likely do you think it is that they'll have the Guard out next weekend? What does that mean for protesters?
I'm happy. I guess the answer is that it really depends where you are. And that's gonna make a really big difference. So it's hard for us, to answer that question. And I'm guessing that you all probably know best the answer to that question for the location that you are in. We know that if you are in California, that there have already been Guard deployed, and I know that there's a lot of resources out there for Guard members if they choose not to, follow illegal orders. And I think that what we know right now, in terms of what it means for protesters, we know that we have First Amendment rights, and that we will be exercising those rights, and that's a critical thing for us to do. in a moment like this, for us to exercise our First Amendment rights and know that we are able to do that. We had a situation certainly here in DC where we had like a beautiful, glorious celebration of Pride, even when we had federal law enforcement kind of threatening to try to shut it down. And so we know that that can happen, right? That we can pull off a beautiful, joyful demonstration of love, even in the face of these kinds of threats. But like, what is going to happen in your location really depends on your governor, your political situation. It does take time to deploy the National Guard, and so whether they're already deployed or not.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly right. And I'm just going to add on to it. The most important thing here is that we show up, what we should say, extraordinarily dedicated and disciplined to joyful, nonviolent, welcoming places and welcoming events so that we can model the world that we want and that we have the power to build our numbers and increase our people-powered strength together without resort to violence. And to keep the big picture, it is unlikely that the National Guard will be deployed in many places, even if they are deployed in some cases. We still have some bits of rule of law. And what we're doing and what we're trying to do is build our capacity generally to collectively take action, work towards a moment when we might do something collectively that allows us to put in place, this improved democracy, a regained rule of law situation, and really stop the consolidation of authoritarian power. And this means that we need to be innovative, we need to be creative, we need to be disciplined, nonviolent activists committed to joy and celebration. And I think that's the most important thing that we can really commit to. Yeah, where should we go next?
Yeah, great. Thank you all so much. That feels like a helpful grounding place. So there's been streams of questions on 3 sort of like what if scenarios that I realize are quite different, but I'll just put them all to you and you can see how you want to respond. As far as things that might need to be de-escalated, one is like, what if MAGA shows up or Proud Boys or, actually that could be quite different, but things that are very much not our side, let's say that. One is, what if it's people on our side escalating in a way that feels unproductive? And then the third is sort of a concept that I think sometimes can get mixed with the last 2, which is sort of an intentional provocateur or somebody trying to intentionally disrupt things for the sake of making the protest less successful, which cannot always be tracked which side they're actually on.
Yeah, I think that we'll have to talk about them sort of in a bunch of different ways. And one of the things is really digging in and improving our capacity to intervene. And that means making sure that we're trained up, making sure that we invest even in the basics of how do we do active listening, being good at assessing what the real threats are. Just because you're fearful doesn't mean you're really threatened. How do we invest and up our capacity to take risk, whether it is approaching someone or not? We can also help each other, help our side differentiate between people who are there to do intentional provocation and disruption, whether they're from the right or the left, or we don't know. They're just having a breakdown of some type because these are really stressful circumstances. Having principled organizing and action guidelines is where we start. Asking someone, you are here because you agreed to these organizing principles. If you are not agreeing to these organizing principles, we would like you to please organize your own event. The door is over here. The exit to the park is over here. We can escort you out if you would like. Thinking about and having a clear idea of how you interact with authorities is also going to be necessary. If there are MAGA right-wing opponents, others that show up with weapons, particularly in an open, and sometimes people show up with weapons in an open carry state that are on our side, having a clear understanding of whether or not you're allowing weapons in your event can be very helpful. Marked very clearly at entrances to parks or events, weapons not allowed, things like this could help. And then making really clear decisions or protocol within your groups on how you're going to deal with someone who might be not just within not just with a weapon, which could be legit in certain circumstances, but people who are acting erratically, people who need to be watched or followed, people who you need to alert the authorities about. Those are different than people who are there, in theory, acting without intent, negative intent. And so just having principled and principles and guidelines to organize, having trained de-escalators, whether they're peacekeepers or marshals or care bears, whatever words you're using, being able to have a relationship and a plan for how you communicate with authorities, all these things are really important. Okay, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, maybe I'll just share some of the things I've seen you, Nadine, do really well. Nadine does this amazing job of just going up to people and being like, why don't you walk with me for a second and let's talk about this question that you have? If there's a counter protester or if there's a person who's armed or if they're, just engaging in that conversation. But sometimes it depends on numbers. We've definitely made decisions like depending on if there are a very large number of people being a problem to actually just move ourselves, honestly, and still have the same event or like there some of it will make for me the most important thing is making sure you have a tactical team that can make that decision and that you've thought about in advance what your plan is, depending on different scenarios. Yeah, so make a plan.
Great. And I'm just going to piggyback on some of what you all said to respond to another thing that I just recently, if you want to build more, but I've got a couple other in the mental queue. But some folks also ask, like, what if I'm not, like, I'm planning on going alone, or I don't feel tapped into a group of like I'm not part of an organizing team that would be doing some of this preparation. It seems that actually, in many cases, a lot of the same things that y'all are saying would still apply, which is to make a plan even with the friend or the friends that you're going with to do this kind of training, to bring these skills with, to see how you can practice other parts of your life, and to assume that you'll try to respond as constructively as possible, even if you're not part of the safety infrastructure, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's always the first person who starts something, but the followers are just as important. I'm sure everybody's seen those funny little videos of the guy dancing by themselves, and then everybody joins, and it's a rave. And the idea here is you see somebody who, peacekeepers or marshals, we encourage them to work in pairs minimally. We encourage people to not spread bad information. If you are going alone, but you find yourself at an event talking, meet someone, talk to the person next to you. Maybe there's somebody else you can hang with for the day. Have someone at home who knows where you are. Have someone set up to check in with you when you get back. Have a place to go, a plan to de-escalate or calm yourself down or do something good for yourself at the end of the day, whatever it is. So all those things do still apply.
Great. Thank you all. Okay, actually pivoting to something that is actually about building safety infrastructure and team. There's been a few questions about numbers of marshals or number of people in safety roles, depending on the size of the event. I know this can fall under the "it depends" category, but if y'all had recommendations for that, a few people have asked about that.
I mean, if you have the nicest thing to say is if you have the capacity to have pairs of people who can actually visually see each other as when you're spread out, that's great. You may not have that capacity either because you don't have the numbers or because the situation is weird. There's trees, there's I don't know, there could be stuff in the way, but then you want to be able to communicate. So, and we all have phones, although you may or may not want to bring your real phone to your protest, but this is just, there's no real easy answer. We would like to have enough people so that you can do a lot of the jobs or take responsibilities for documenting, for doing legal observation, for doing medic, support, for handing out water, for doing communication, all those things. And that will really help you determine it. It's possible if you end up with thousands and thousands of people and you only were thinking you're going to get 100, maybe you can tap some of those people that you know and do a quick on-site training with them or partner them up with one person who is trained so you can double your numbers if you needed more people. So thinking innovatively is not just for like an action, like what creative action we can do, but it's thinking in the moment how you yourself can show up in a better way.
Thanks, y'all. Okay, one thing that I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on, it came up a couple times this past week or at the last one, and again this one. There's kind of been some stuff circulating a little bit viral around this, like if something happens, sit down, everybody sit down concept. I think I wanted to clarify that that's not necessarily something that this coalition is saying is like some sort of go-to set of behaviors that there might be circumstances where that could be a choice that would make sense, a lot where it wouldn't. But if y'all just wanted to put a button on that, that would be great. Or maybe
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
the button. Sorry.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good button. In the category of escalative or de-escalative, I think that, sitting down is an interesting one, right? If you sit down, I'm a pretty small person. If somebody's pushing me, they're going to be able to push me unless I sit down. And so if like an individual is pushing me, I might make that choice. That's different from a collective choice to sit down, right? But depending on the circumstance, that could be an escalative thing to do, and it could be a de-escalative thing to do. And since in these situations we're trying for Saturday specifically, we're trying to de-escalate. I think it somewhat depends on the circumstances, but I think what you said, Nora, is like this is actually not a sit-in we're doing on Saturday. This is a rally that we're attending, and there might be moments when who knows? I mean, again, this is like assess, take a breath, make sure you're centered, make a choice. Sometimes you're just tired, so you're sitting down. We did this event on the Capitol where there were all these little kids with us, and they sat down, and the police were like, "That's a sit-in," and I was like, "No, they're just two. They're closer to the ground. It's comfortable to sit." So I think sitting is fine, but it's all based on context.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And
Oh,
and I
sorry.
do think I just to reiterate, like I have seen these things going around on the internet. I really I feel that if you're an organizer or part of a safety team, communicating amongst peoples about what we're gonna support people doing is really important. And even if lots of people sit down, that could be very powerful, could also put you in a vulnerable situation. So hopefully there's a tactical team, there's a group of people who are paying attention to the circumstance and will be able to communicate the decision collectively about what happens. It's also possible something bad happens. This is the scenario that's been rolling around. Somebody's throwing things, everybody sits down because they've read it on the internet, and then the message might come from the organizers, actually, please stand up and file out. Like that is possible. So just be ready to be flexible, pay attention to where you are, and I think that's the answer. There's not a one size fits all.
Great. Thanks, y'all. Okay, last question, and then I think we'll call it. So actually, there's been a number of questions with regards to posture in relationship to presence of police. For instance, there was a question where somebody said our group disagrees about whether inviting police presence, like some people believing that that could help make the event more safe, other people feeling very differently about that. Just wondering if y'all could speak a little bit about the ways to think through how that is once again something that can vary quite widely, but also we're certainly in a time when authoritarian presence is not something to be relied upon for safety.
I can start. So I think actually it's not just that some people like want there to be police and other people don't. The actual danger of having police there are different for different people, and I think that's something that's important for us to understand. Like the police aren't treating everybody equally, and don't have an equal relationship with people depending on all kinds of things, their race, their ability, all kinds of issues. And so one thing I would say is that it's really, really important to have a plan to keep yourselves safe. Regardless of what you're going to do, and I know that there's a marshal, de-escalator, peacekeeper, whatever you want to call it, manual that's going to be, shared with folks. But it's really important that we have a plan anytime we go out in public in a group, that we have a plan to keep ourselves safe. And that's learning some of those things that I'm guessing are going to be in that handbook, right? Like if a person is acting up, like don't encircle them so they can't get out, make a V shape so they can actually leave if they're agitated. You want those people to leave, agitated people, so make a shape so they can leave. These are all things that we can learn and teach ourselves and study beforehand so that we have the ability to keep ourselves safe no matter what. Because whether or not you invite the police, they might show up. You likely have no control over that one way or the other. But you do have control over yourselves and how prepared you are, and whether you are ready to keep yourselves safe by having medics, by having, skilled de-escalators, and all the roles that we've been talking about.
Great. I think that's great. And really, one of our principles, one of the organizing principles here is honoring those who are most impacted and most vulnerable. And so, letting them lead with their particular take on this would be probably the way to go. Anyways, we're going to close up. It's time. We really appreciate people investing in training and preparation for this work that we do together. Collective people power building. We appreciate Indivisible and everybody here hosting, Mary and Juliana behind the scenes, and Nora right here as well. Yeah, let's see each other in the streets. If you want to leave by putting, we can open the chat up for the final goodbye. Tell us one thing you're taking away from this 90 minutes we spent together. We'd love to see it. And really looking forward to seeing people at the events soon or on this weekend or right after. Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good evening.